if I'm going to do good for me, I have to do good for everybody else. And while I tried to build CNN.com and build a great thing back in the 90s and all the other businesses I built, I always tried to build what I was building at that time the best that I could, no matter the circumstances I was doing. But I also, at the same time, tried to give back. I think it's really important early to find something that triggers within you that you can give back. And a lot of people are like, well, in my high school, I did this charity thing. I said, no, you did that to get into college. Something's going to happen in your life that's going to give you purpose.
Welcome again, everyone, to the Liberty Ventures podcast, where we're building up the ecosystem of purpose-driven business leaders who are committed to a free and prosperous future, helping you scale your businesses to scale your impact and making the world a better place. And I'm just thrilled to be talking today with Richy Glassberg, who right now is the CEO and co-founder of Safeguard Privacy, but has a rich experience in the digital and media space. And Richy, thank you so much for joining us. And I want to give you a chance to begin with in sharing your personal story over your career that's led to what you're doing now and the wealth of wisdom and experience that you're bringing to the table on this conversation. Thank you.
Oh, Alex, it's my pleasure. I'm happy to be here today with Liberty Ventures. I thought it'd be a lot of fun to do this. I love purpose-driven, so it's great. So my background, I'm an old dog, as you can tell by the gray in the beard. I think all the best entrepreneurs got a little bit of gray in their beard. I've been in the media business since 1985. I started at a little company called MTV when it was still music videos. And the cool thing, I think one of the cool things was when I got out of college, I wanted to get into sales, and I was interviewing around and a lot of different job offers and different things. And complicated, but the woman who was running production at MTV, I got an interview with her at a school. And look, when we all graduate, nobody's got any experience in anything. We all think we know everything, but you know absolutely nothing. And I sat down and I had my suit on and my one suit, and I was telling her what I wanted to do. And I just interviewed the day before at manufacturer Hanover's, the predecessor to Chase. And I'm like, this is what I want to do. I want to be in the media business. I want to be in sales. And she looked at me and she said, Richie, you're a snot-nosed kid. You don't know anything. You don't know what you want to do. And I was like, excuse me? And she goes, look, I make the product. If you want to sell something, learn how to make the product. And I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. She said, come work for me. I'll teach you how to make television. In a couple of years, if you still want to sell it, then you can sell television. It was really a great life lesson. The other thing she did was she was one of the first. I've had a ton of mentors in my life, but there's 3 mentors that I'll talk about that really were at inflection points in my career and made a big difference. And I think the real definition of a mentor is someone who looks at another human being and sees a tremendous amount of potential, understands they don't have what to do that job, but gives them a chance. And I think one of the things we forget in today's world is everybody thinks they want to graduate from school, go to business school, and start Facebook and be Mark Zuckerberg. Mark is 1 in 7.5 billion. The rest of us all have to go learn something before you're going to go disintermediate something. And I think those are critical lessons. So I had the greatest job out of college. I did every live show on MTV from Live Aid until Amnesty International. And one day I walked into a guy named Bob Pittman, who's running iHeartRadio, and a guy named Tom Freston, who was the head of MTV. And I said, hey, I want to be in sales. And I was the kid from production in jeans and T-shirts. They looked at me and said, we want you to go to LA and start production. I said, no, I want to be in sales. Convinced them, 6 months to get through the process. And I was the first guy they hired in sales at the time, not from a rep firm. I sold every network at MTV, so it was a great selling experience. And then this company called Turner Broadcasting was the #1 sales organization in all of cable. And it was very tough. Ted Turner ran a really tough shop. It was highly rated, the best training program in the world. And they came and they recruited me. And I said no for 6 months because I was comfortable. I was with family. 6 years, the first company I started with. And finally, the head guy there looked at me and said, Richie, you only know how to sell niche networks. You want to have a great career, you need to learn how to sell something else. It's a great lesson that you need to have a great foundation for a 40-year career. And you can't just be a one-trick pony. And I sat back and I said, well, I really love this family. But I don't know anything other than niche networks. I don't know anything other than teens. And the advertising world is a much broader space than that. And Turner had broad-based networks, TBS, TNT, they were launching. They had CNN. They had all this other stuff, Cartoon Network. And it was scary, but I took a big risk and I left my family and I went to work at Turner Broadcasting. My first mentor at MTV was a woman named Mona Kligman who gave me the shot. My second mentor was a guy named Harvey Gano who got me into sales when I had no reason to be in sales. Then I went to Turner and I sold for a bunch of years. And I was the youngest human to be made a manager. And they made me a regional manager. And I picked up myself and my family and I moved to LA. And I will tell you, it was the worst year of my life. I failed miserably. And that's the other huge lesson about a career. So this was 8 years into my career. It was a massive failure. It was my first job managing a team. I was young. They were all older than me. But it was also my first time in a region. Usually when you're in the home office, it's different being in the region. And not doing either of those, it was a spectacular flame out. And what you learn from that is your career's not over. Careers are not a vector from up and to the right in a straight line. Careers are Escher staircases. They go sideways, they go down, they plateau. And I was devastated. But the company offered me a chance to move back to New York, and I had to take a demotion. They said, look, you are a VP and a manager, but to come back, there's no management jobs open. We think you're great. You failed at this. We don't want you to leave the company. And I took a step back. That's one of the things that I think is so critically important in careers. Understanding that taking a step back or a lateral step is not a career killer. I can't stress that enough. And I moved back and they said, look, we're going to give you the first shot at the first management opening, whatever it'll be. You're the first one interviewed, unless you throw up on your shoes, it's yours. So I came back with no promises. And about a year, 9 months later, after I came back, my third mentor, a guy named Rick Servaitis, who was the head of CNN sales, said to me, hey, come to this conference room in New York. And it was a conference room, and there was Ted, there was a guy named Harry Macho, a guy named Scott Wolfel, and another guy. And they said, hey, we're starting CNN on the internet. And you have to understand, this is January of 1995. And I said, what's the internet? Because it was Prodigy. There was something called AOL and I didn't know. And there was a lot of funny comments like, oh, just shut up. And I said, okay, I'm in. I'll be the head of sales of that. It was Turner Broadcasting. I had to keep my day job because we didn't know if it was going to work. So I had to do 2 jobs for a year. And when I went back to my office and told everybody else, all the senior management in cable, these very successful people said, you're throwing away your career. What are you doing? What's this internet? You're, the senior guy on CNN. You should wait for a different kind of management job. And in my head, I said, if Ted Turner tells you to do something, you say how high. And look, that was a turning point in my career. I went on to run CNN.com, all the revenue in the BD around the world for 4 years. Because of my experience in cable, I was with 30 people at a company early in 1996, and 8 of us founded the Internet Advertising Bureau. It's the largest trade group for the entire digital industry around the world. So I was the founding vice chairman of that for 6 years. I set some of the biggest standards in internet advertising with a group of other dedicated volunteers. And then we hired professional people after 6 years, and they ran it. And now it's the largest trade organization, the IAB, around the world. So again, career, family, industry. How do you give back? And when I was in cable, it was all about giving back. So my life since then has been really 7 startups. So, either startups or turnaround in either 3 inside big media companies. Turner did 1 on my own afterwards, 2 in News Corp, and then 2 more afterwards. And I'm on my 7th. And it really was that foundation of being able to learn things, being able to do stuff for the industry that's really driven my career to this point. And the ability to say yes to things that are scary and things that are not in your wheelhouse. The interesting thing about me is I'm one of the very few people that's been a publisher head, a network head, an agency head, and an ad tech head. And that is a broad-based foundation that allows you to build a really big career on top of it. So I talk a lot about the early stuff. Really, the later stuff was just a lot of really cool, exciting building and failing, and started a company after Turner that I built it up, raised money to go public, first time raising money, got wiped out, filed to go public in February of 2000. The market turned in March of 2000, got wiped out, bankrupt, had to lay everybody off, had to pick myself up, had some family issues, dealt with a sick child, took a safe job at News Corp. Kid did great, went back to the startup world. So it's like, I don't want to bore you with all the details, but it really is a career of lots of twists and turns and understanding that failure is literally one of the greatest catalysts to leaping forward in your career.
Richie, there's so much to unpack from that. I love the description of a career being an Escher staircase that's not just always going up. It's down, it's sideways and up all combined together. But I want to take a step back to the very beginning because there's a big lesson in there where you said you wanted to do sales, but you were told that you need to first learn how to create the product in order to be able to sell it effectively. And there's a lot to unpack there. I'm curious if you learned that lesson from going into the production side before you start to get into sales and then start your own businesses and scale things up.
I think it's the foundation of everything I do. It's the bedrock. I was one of the very few people selling television that understood what it was to make television. So as I got higher in my career, so I went to News Corp, and I ran something called Speed Vision, which became Speed Channel. And all of a sudden, I'm running this with a bunch of other people. I'd never been in sports. And the main selling driver was creating television shows around new car launches. And my understanding of what it really, how long it would take, how much it would cost, what the profit margins, and that really helped me at Turner as well. But I think for any market, anything that you're selling, if you understand what the product is and how to make the product, I think you become a better seller, a better leader, a better team member. If you don't understand how hard it is for that software engineer to write code and do that, and you think that you're just going to tell them, I need this feature in 2 weeks, that's a problem.
I think that is absolutely on point. And most entrepreneurs discover this themselves because they're both building the product and selling it at the same time, and they need both of those skills. But for a lot of people who come from the corporate environment, like you did before you went into the startup mode, they just have the experience of being in sales, and they're not necessarily combining the two together.
But I think that's an important thing. Let's look at it. I wasn't an entrepreneur. I was an intrapreneur. The beauty of saying yes to Ted Turner was, and Harry Macho and Scott was, we all learned how to be an entrepreneur inside a big media company. Sometimes that's the most effective path to be a great entrepreneur. And I know everybody's like, I'm going to graduate from school. I'm going to go to, some incubator. I'm going to learn. I mean, hey, you know what? Just go work in a business for 6 or 7 years. Learn what an industry is. Then you can learn how to entrepreneur and how you can break it. And a lot of times I speak to grad schools and I'll say to these kids, who's going to start a company? They all raise their hand. I'm like, go break something first. It was amazing to be an intrapreneur and learn how to be an entrepreneur in the safety. Now, by the way, Alex, a lot of people do that and don't leave the safety. It's hard to teach people how to jump off the cliff. It's hard to teach people. A lot of times I'll get invited to a grad school to an entrepreneur class. And I'll say, you can't teach it. So I don't get invited back. But the point is, it's really hard to teach somebody the ability to jump off a cliff. It really is. Human nature, human beings don't like rejection, and they don't like failure, right? That's why it was so hard for everybody to get a date to the prom in high school. You don't want to be rejected. You hate failure. And I think to be an entrepreneur, you have to understand that failure is your number one lesson. Failing is the way that you build. If the thing you're trying to build existed, you wouldn't be an entrepreneur. There'd be no need for it, right? So if it existed, somebody else did it. So if you're doing something new, you have to understand failure is your number one learning tool. It's very hard to get people over that hump.
And you're right, it can't be taught. You have to take the risk in going out on your own to build something new. So, what led you to decide that you wanted to take that leap, that you were going to go from being an intrapreneur to an entrepreneur? And how was that transition for you?
I have no idea why I did it. I'll be honest with you. Even looking back, I've been running CNN.com around the world for 4 years. We launched a bunch of different brand things. We launched the IAB. I was the vice chairman of that. I was making tremendous amounts of money. It was a glamour job. I was working hard, traveling all over the world. But I saw that the internet, as it was evolving in the 4 years I ran CNN.com, that it was missing something very important. And the thing that I saw was missing was a premium ad network. And at the time, and it's hard to explain, there was something called DoubleClick and something called 24/7. and advertisers could buy 5,000 sites, but they didn't know what it was. They were buying Alex and Richie. And General Motors didn't want to buy Alex and Richie. General Motors wanted to buy CNN.com. Brands wanted to buy big brands. And what we did was we created the first premium ad network out there. And by doing that, I represented the Sydney Olympics. I represented the NHL, all of Hachette. And it was an amazing leap forward because it didn't exist. And I learned how much I didn't know, Alex. I didn't know what HR did, even though I knew the people at HR. I didn't know about because back in 1999, you had to sign leases because nobody was remote. You had to buy an Outlook server to have email. I raised money. I'd never raised money before. It was a baptism by fire. We went from me to 235 people in a year and a half. We went from zero revenue to 100 million revenue in 18 months. And then the internet turned and I got wiped out. We went back down to 40. I grew too big. But at the time, the mantra was go big or go home. And as the VC said, I crashed the F-14, and I raised 36 million bucks and I lost it all from 99 to 2001. But I built a great company, and market forces literally wiped out everybody. I mean, literally thousands of companies got wiped out. So I don't know why I did it, other than the fact that I saw a massive need in the market because of my experience. And I was right. I was 10 years too early. And that's part of the scary part about being an entrepreneur. Being right, being early is just as bad as being wrong. And that's hard, right? That's a lesson that we all have to learn. I'll tell you the other thing that was the most important thing about those 2.5 years was when I left Turner. It gets a little personal. My older sister got diagnosed with terminal breast cancer. So now, to make the story a little bit better, she survived because the diagnosis was a little bit, they didn't know. But, we went through this for about 8 months with my sister in Florida, my mother in Maryland, and me in New York. And through all this, I met a woman named Dr. Marisa Weiss, and she had written the book, Living Beyond Breast Cancer. And after my sister turned the corner and we knew she was going to be okay, Dr. Weiss said to me, "Hey, Richie, I wrote this book and I'm trying to start a website for women with breast cancer." And she had the worst name of anything out there. So long story short, I helped Dr. Weiss found breastcancer.org. Breastcancer.org now, 24 years later, is the largest informational site for women around the world. We serve over 23 million unique women around the world. I helped found it. I helped her buy the name. I set up all the revenue for her. For 11 years, I ran the biggest fundraiser for her. I was on the board for 22 years, but good governance, I stepped off as it got bigger, allowed more women philanthropists to be on the board. But more than anything I've done in my career, the founding of breastcancer.org, getting it alive, getting it up and running, getting it to the point where it is the number one website for women in the world with breast cancer. We served 23 million unique women last year. That's the biggest accomplishment I've done. Never made a penny for it. 23 million women a year don't even know who I am. But that's what I really think that is one of the most important things I've ever done in my career.
That's so impactful in addition to everything else that you've been doing. And for any other entrepreneurs who are listening to this right now, not only taking away the importance of getting the timing right and to being willing to take the risk, as you reflect back on all the companies that you've started, both the for-profits and the nonprofits, what are some of the other key takeaways that you've taken from the experience that others can learn from?
Oh, I mean, Dr. Weiss said to me, "Hey, you know the internet. I know this. Help me. I need your help." You talk about, how can you help people? You never know how you can help people. And I think it's more of a question of what do you need and how can I help you? Dr. Weiss helped my sister, my mother, and I understand. She wasn't our doctor. She was somebody who could explain the things. And I looked at the internet, and I still look at the internet, not as the noise we're seeing out there with social media with all the hate. What the internet really is the ability to democratize the spreading of information. And breastcancer.org is peer reviewed. It's one of the best, most trusted resources in the world. That's the value of the internet. And my belief in everything I learned was, if I'm going to do good for me, I have to do good for everybody else. And while I tried to build CNN.com and build a great thing back in the 90s, and all the other businesses I built the largest mobile ad server, which we ended up selling to WPP. I built a lot of different things. I always tried to build what I was building at that time the best that I could. no matter the circumstances I was doing. But I also, at the same time, tried to give back. I was on the board of BCO for 22 years. I'm on the board of something called the Tom Dearline Foundation. I serve on the board of the marketing board of the UJA. I think it's really important early to find something that triggers within you that you can give back. And a lot of people are like, well, in my high school, I did this charity thing. I said, no, you did that to get into college. Something's going to happen in your life that's going to give you purpose. My older sister almost died from it. My other sister battled it. That gave me purpose. And with my experience in the internet, I was able to take my experience, that personal purpose, and I was able to make a difference. So I really think, it's family, it's your career, and it's the community. And it doesn't have to be big like breastcancer.org. It can be your local X. You can impact people incredibly powerfully on a local level. I would argue that grassroots, breastcancer.org is kind of grassroots, that grassroots is as important as starting, anything else you can do out there. But you got to find that passion, Alex. You got to find the thing that gives you purpose. And I would argue it's the same thing for your career. I mean, I've made a lot of decisions where, you're going to face times in your career where either the people or the product isn't what you want to do, and you're going to have to make a decision on what you want to do. There's no stock answer for that, Alex, right? We're human beings and we're complex and we're heavily nuanced. And I realized that I like building things. I've been in massive corporations. I've been at MTV when it was small and got big. I've been in Turner Broadcasting when it was big. I've been in News Corp when it was big. I've been in WPP. I realized that I have more fun when I'm building, and I can have fun building on the side of these big companies. But I realized that I didn't love when I was in the big part of the big companies. I didn't like dealing with something that couldn't innovate. And it's very hard for the big companies to innovate. And I think you can be a really successful entrepreneur if you like to be in that environment, right? There are people that successfully turn around very large companies. I find that for me, I like to turn around a smaller thing and build that smaller thing into a bigger thing. So it's a long-winded answer to your question. It's very personal how an entrepreneur finds joy. And people find joy in many different areas. And I'm not saying follow your passion. I'm saying follow the things that make you feel satisfied. Your family, your career, and the environment around you. How do you do those? How's that the tripod of your stool to give you real stability to make something strong out of your career? I also think you have to look at your career as like 40 to 50 years. There's a great book, The 100-Year Life, that said my parents, I'm older than you, they went to college, they worked for 35 years, they retired, and they died. Now we're living longer, healthier, that you're going to have 4 or 5 careers. You're not just going to go work for IBM for 35 years or GE for 35 years. And I think if people start looking at their careers as, look, my freshman year is like my first 10 years of college. I had no choice. I did the regular stuff. I was on a team or I was in a group, but I wasn't the head. Your sophomore year is your next 10 years. Break it up into 10-year chunks and think about your career differently than I'm going to graduate from college and I'm going to be the VP of big ideas and I'm going to be the CEO of big ideas. And sometimes I think people make it too complicated and they frustrate themselves because they think they're going to be the boss on day one. And look, I'm running companies. I'm not the boss. You know what I am? I'm a coach. I'm a mentor. I am somebody giving people the vision of what I want to build. But they've got to come up with the vision because, if it was just me, it doesn't scale. And the whole point of leadership is scaling, right? It's getting other people to buy your vision and getting other people to say, how do I buy into this vision? And how do I get the best out of me, right? And it's not you, it's getting the best out of your teams. And it's such a different mindset. And I fail at that every day. Like, I'm a human being. I get frustrated. I'm like, all right, don't get frustrated, breathe. All right, we just got to figure out how to get this done because nothing goes the way you want it to go.
100%. And that's why I think your point that as an entrepreneur, you need to figure out what satisfies you, or you do need to figure out what your purpose is to help you get through the challenging points, the points where you are failing, the obstacles in your way, because they're going to be there. And you need something more than just chasing after a dollar or just chasing after one small thing. It needs to be a big vision, a big purpose to keep you going.
Dude, Alex, they've never made a burial shroud with pockets. You're not taking this with you. So, one of the reasons I agreed to be on this was because I was intrigued by the fact that you guys are talking about purpose-driven leadership, and I love that stuff. I think it's incredibly important to realize that none of us are on this journey alone. We're all here with other people. I mean, we're a social animal. The whole thing is being social. How do you help society? How do you help your peers? How do you help people that you don't even know? Nobody even knows my name. There's people who don't even know I am. And I can be like, I really helped people, but I don't need them to know me and I don't need to know them. You just need to know that purpose, being able to help. To me, that's healing the broken world. I really believe, charity is really supposed to be anonymous. You're not supposed to put your name on the hospital wing that you do. I really believe you're supposed to do good for others. And that also does good for you. And it nurtures your soul, because your journey is a hard journey and you got to do things to help your own journey. And I think by helping others, you help yourself. And people helped me tremendously. I never would have been here without, and not just the 3 mentors I named. So many people have helped me. And, my best friend in the world, my wife, we've been together for almost 36 years. I never would have had, I don't care who your partner is, you need a great partner. And, it's a journey. You have family, you have setbacks, you need somebody who believes in you, and you need somebody to believe in as well. My wife has got an amazing career as a lawyer. You really have to, it doesn't matter what it is, but you're not alone. None of us are alone here. Everyone thinks they're this lone wolf cowboy mythology. None of the cowboys were alone. They were all in a group. Nobody drove those cattle by themselves. So I'm babbling here a bit, Alex, but I'm trying to say being together and figuring out how to work with people is probably the most powerful thing you can do in your career.
Richie, I think that is a fantastic note for us to end on. Really, thank you for sharing all of your insights and experience with the Liberty Ventures community. This is so valuable. I just so appreciate everything that you're doing, everything you have done over your career, and what you're continuing to build. Thank you.
Appreciate you having me on. I hope things go well on the podcast.
I'm excited to get this out there. Really, thank you.